Hello and welcome to this video presentation. My name is Marco Massignan and I'm a trainer and a therapist in Ritual Constellations. Ritual Constellations is the name I gave to my work, which is made of three main components. Family Constellations work, which is mainly a work on relationships, Shamanism, the spiritual part of the work, and body-based trauma resolution. Basically, Ritual Constellations is a group work. We can work with 10 people, 50 people, 100 people in a setting made, we're sitting like in a circle, and one by one people come and sit close to me, and they can introduce a theme or something they want to improve in their lives, or a problem they want to solve. It could be anything from a relationship problem, like a problem with your daughter or son, or a couple issue with your partner. It could be something that comes from your parents, or you want to improve maybe your life, the relationship with money, the relationship with your boss or at work, something like that. Or also we can also work on something that like accidents, the consequences of traumatic events like aggression, birth trauma, the death of a dear one, and so on. This is actually a energetic and spiritual work. It's not psychotherapy and it's not a medical work, of course. We mainly work on the deep issues that keep us from living our life fully. So in this work, in these group sessions, people come close to me one by one. Each one of them brings an issue, a problem, or something they want to improve in their lives. We call it a theme. And so we have a very little interview when I ask people to express themselves, and mainly I ask them to express what they want, what's their intent. And after that we can work in many different ways. It could be something like putting up what we call a systemic representation, like it's like a theater. It's like a sacred theater where the main client chooses different people in the audience. Could be somebody to represent their father, their mother, themselves, their brother, their sister, and so on. And then the main client sits again close to me and watches the scene, what happens on the scene, like a stage. It's like a stage. And the representatives, like what we call the representatives, it's like actors without a script. They start to feel the emotions that the mother, the father of the client feel in their real lives, and they start to act like they do, even though they don't know the client. So this is like a sort of three-dimensional meditation, where the person can watch him or herself from the outside. And this has a lot of potential. Because we usually in our lives we always live our own small trips or movies, and we don't see reality as it is. Then I can put up some music during the representation. I can play some music with my drum. I can ask the people on stage to say some words or to say some sentences to each other, in order to have the dynamics, the hidden dynamics of the family or the family system to come up, to come to conscience, so the client becomes aware of it. This is, as I said, a group work, so it has a lot of potential, even though you don't work directly on yourself, or even though you are just there and watch what happens in the room, what I say, what the people do. You will anyway get a lot of resonance in yourself, and you will maybe recognize, oh, that belongs to my father. Oh, that's how my mother used to do. Oh, this is me. So it's a lot. There's a lot of potential in this, a lot of potential for awakening to real life and awakening to love. Mainly, what's behind this work is something like love with a capital L, something that actually drives and motivates the human beings on earth, and it's something that we can actually call evolutionary forces. What I just described is actually common to all kinds of systemic work, family constellation work. If you're familiar with that, you know how it works, and you know the potential of what I just described. What is peculiar to my interpretation of the family constellation work, and that's the reason why I called it ritual constellations, is that it also gets knowledge and is informed by the experiences I had with tribal peoples in my life, and especially with Native American people. Uh, Jokingly, I always say that since I was a child, I would uh, play with little soldiers and have Indians win, um, to express the fact that I always had a passion for Native American cultures since I was a child. Then, when I went to the university in Milan, Italy, I was lucky enough to have a professor who allowed me to specialize in Anglo American literature and have a dissertation on the Native American Sundance, which is the main ceremony of the prairie people in the US and Canada. And after that, that dissertation became my first book, and I became the editor of a series of books, um, which was centered on Native American cultures. And in that period of my life, we're talking about the early 90s, my main job was to translate and edit works by contemporary Native American authors, and works, essays on medicine men and spiritual leaders, which were not available in my mother language. At the same time, I started to invite in Europe tribal groups like powwow dance groups and medicine people to come to my country, to Switzerland, to Austria, and to perform ceremonies, healing sessions, both individual and group sessions. We also took part in several events like shamanism meetings and so on with shamans and medicine people from all over the world. And actually, that's where I learned the main things, the basis of my work that I do today. Um, Working with these medicine people was actually like a training. I received a traditional training from a few of them. And traditionally, in native cultures, trainings and knowledge are not passed on a written basis, but are passed orally. So I was working as an interpreter, as an assistant, as a helper. And that's where I learned many of the songs that I use in my work now, and many of the skills. Later on, in 2004, I met Family Constellation work by Bert Hellinger and other therapists, both German and Italian, and I recognized in this kind of work many of the things that the natives do in their ceremonies and rituals, but expressed in a way that is more understandable by the European public, by the Western mind. Like for instance, if you go to a native medicine man, maybe you have to bring your whole family, and you will have to organize um, a ceremony that lasts for days and bring a lot of material like deer hides, corn, food, cloth, other stuff, and that's not really practicable Western in a Western context. You know, so on the other hand, with family constellations, that's more. You can do almost the same things, and you just bring yourself. You can work on you and your family, you and your partner, you and your parents, and you just bring yourself, and you don't have to undergo many of the things that are being done in native ceremonies. As I said, in 2004 I met family constellation work, and I learned it in a series of meetings and trainings, and then the two things, the what I had learned from the natives and the family constellation work, started to merge, and something came out which I called ritual constellations. Ritual constellations, so it's uh, a way to do constellation work that is more spiritual, more based within shamanism. Um, at the same time, in 2003, I met my spiritual leader, what I recognize now as my guru in the Indian tradition, Eastern Indian tradition, who is Amma, Srimata Amritananda Mai Devi. And so I can say that I'm a kind of a strange animal now. I was born in Italy in this life. I learned a lot from Native American people in Canada and the United States. Um, I learned. I'm learning, still learning a lot from Amma and the Eastern India tradition. And at the same time, my native teachers prompted me to go back to my country, to the land where I was born, which is northern Italy, and to rediscover the spirits that are there. So it's not really something that, trying to monkey somebody else, but they always tell me, go back to your ancestors and see where you come from. And so the other component which is very important in my work is the old European traditions, and mainly the Celtic one, because the Celts were the last tribal people who walked on the land where I was born. So during the years when I followed the traditional apprenticeship with a few Native American medicine people, both in the United States and in Canada, and also in Europe, of course. I was given a spiritual name and a few ceremonies like the Sacred Pipe ceremony, the Vision Quest, and the traditional Sweat Lodge. So in 2004 we created our institute, which is called Nemeton Institute for Shamanic and Systemic Art. And we call it art because we believe it is an art. It is the art of being able to help people who come to us in a new way, which includes the spiritual and the energetic side of life. And in time, we've become one of Italy's main schools in the field of family constellations and the shamanism. And over time, we've been helping thousands of people, and we've been started to train people into doing our work. And nowadays we are glad to see that many of our pupils, maybe many of the people who started to learn from us, are now working uh, all over Europe, and applying the techniques and the teachings that came through us. And we believe that people can change only if they want to. So, and we are happy to help people realize their own potential and their own objectives. Compared to traditional family constellation work, in ritual constellations, we work a lot with the ancestors and even remote ancestors. This is basically in line with traditional shamanism and the different forms of tribal spirituality that belonged to our ancestors in the past and belong to tribal peoples nowadays. Because we can observe that the patterns that were created by our ancestors, even in the remote past, still live within us, and many times they keep us from living our life fully and realize our full potential. And this is true for families, and this is true for peoples at large, and ethnic minorities, races, cultures, and so on, even religions. So we keep in mind that we want to improve our life now, because only in the now life can happen, and we cannot live in the past, and we cannot live in the future. At the same time, our mind always tries to go back to the past and dwell on it, and act like a victim in a kind of victim way, or to project into the future and worry about the future. What's going to happen? What am I going to do? Am I going to succeed in this or that? In this way, our mind is trying to take us away from life in the present moment. So we don't go back to the past and work with the ancestors just for the fun of it, or just to see what happens, or because we don't know what else to do. We go back into the past only and only to improve our life now. So we start with a client who comes and brings a problem, and then we go back into the past and see that many times from the work, it emerges that that kind of problem also belonged to a grandfather or a grandmother or a great grandfather, or something that happened in the past. It could be even 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And that's actually where the problem originated. So, by recognizing that and being guided by myself, the client is able to give back to the ancestor his thoughts, his emotions, his feelings, and to take back his life. It's like, as they say in traditional shamanism, it's like reclaiming parts of yourself that are missing, that are stuck in the past. Like, for instance, you had an accident, a car accident 20 years ago, and you are unable to drive, or you cannot go back into that place without having nightmares. So we go back into the past only in order to serve the present and to improve life in the present. Because change can only happen if a person really wants it.